Test 1 2. Test 1 2. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Preston Sports Podcast. Sorry about the past week. Had a lot of technology difficulties, had some software difficulties. Some of the time, I had a couple days where I was just being lazy, so I wasn't able to get it up. But I'll work the weekend. I'll get a video up today. Hopefully try to get a video up tomorrow. Before I get started, don't forget, click like, click subscribe, punch the notification bell. I'm so sorry, headphone users. I have to do that every time. But I want to talk about I had a conversation with Corbin this past Wednesday, and I just want to talk about who I think the elite teams are in the NFL, but then in each conference. So, my last video was talking about how I said that I do not think the Titans would be an elite team. I think they're winning 11 games at most, but I just don't think they'll be elite. I think they'll have to get lucky to win those 11 games, mainly because of their lack of defensive ability. I'll start with the Titans. This was, of course, after the Julio trade, when everyone was saying because of that trade, they're going to win the Super Bowl and all this stuff. Let's look at I'm pulling up the Titans' schedule right now, because it is entirely possible that I just haven't taken a solid look at their schedule, and because of that, I'm just confused. But let's take a look at it. So Titans, I said, I think Ryan Tannehill's a really good quarterback. Derrick Henry, obviously, really good running back. A.J. Brown, Julio Jones are great receivers. But my problem is, after Julio Jones and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, they have no weapons offensively. Josh Reynolds is the wide receiver 3. Anthony Firkser is the number 1 tight end. That's just not enough. They have Jeffrey Simmons, who played okay last year. Harold Landry, who's young but needs to develop. Bud Dupree coming off of a contract year where, of course, he's going to play well. It's a contract year. Not only that, but tearing his ACL. Jayon Brown, Rashaan Evans will be good. They've just been good. They lost Kenny Vaccaro in free agency, so they have Amani Hooker starting at strong safety. But then my problem, Jackrabbit, Janoris Jenkins, and Caleb Farley are their starting corners. And when I was talking with Corbin, he said, if you look at the Giants last year, would you have thought they would have had an elite defense? And I said, no. And he said, but they did. My problem with that argument to defend the Titans' defense, the Giants, while you didn't think their defense would be elite, you knew they had James Bradberry, who at the time wasn't thought of as elite, but he was thought of as serviceable, which he is. He's serviceable. Or at the time he was thought of as serviceable. Now we know he is really good. He's an elite corner. But, they still had Xavier McKinney. But all that aside, they had one of the best interior defensive lines in football. Just undisputedly. Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and I always forget the third one. Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence. I want to say it's not Demario Davis. Leonard Williams. Okay, but you know the point. It's Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and then shoot, who is it? I apologize. I always remember 2 of them, but I always forget the third. Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence. I want the 2020 roster. Dalvin Tomlinson, that's him. He's with the Vikings. But yeah, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, and Dalvin Tomlinson. That was one of the best offensive fronts. I'm sure they had no edge rushers, but at the same time, that's one of the best offensive fronts, or defensive fronts rather. So of course their defense was going to be good, and I think that defensive line made up for a lot of the coverage inability. Because yes, they had James Bradberry, but other than that, they don't have much in terms of secondary. I like Jabril Peppers, but he's by no means a top-tier safety. Xavier McKinney played okay, but he wasn't phenomenal. outside of James Bradbury, they don't have much at corner. And so, of course, the Giants' defense is going to be good. Like, Blake Martinez had a lot of tackles, but he was allowing a lot of catches. You know, it doesn't matter if you make the tackle if they're able to get 5-10 yards downfield by the time you make that tackle. So I think the Titans, they definitely have the possibility of being elite, but they have to do something with the defense. What they have now is just not enough to, in any way, shape, or form, to be elite. But, one second, I just want to... Corbin and I constantly argue about Blake Martinez. But, so my problem with Blake Martinez is he gets a lot of tackles, but I want to look at his advanced stats. Okay, Corbin, this is just for you. Blake Martinez, so in 16 games, he had 1 interception. He was targeted 75 times and allowed 59 completions. He allowed a 78.7% completion percentage. He allowed 516 yards. He allowed 8.7 yards per completion. He allowed 6.9 yards per target. Now, he did allow 0 touchdowns, which is pretty good. He allowed an 89 QB rating. So, you see my problem here. Yeah, he's getting tackles, but he's allowing passes. See, Corbin? Blake Martinez can get all the tackles he wants. He's still allowing 500 yards. And in all honesty, you can say he improved a lot this year because some of those numbers are down. His completion percentage allowed is down. His yards allowed are down. His rating allowed is down. But at the same time, you know, he allowed almost an 80% completion percentage. Blake Martinez, not elite. Anyways, so I don't think the Titans will be elite. I have no reason to believe it. Caleb Farley is unproven and injury prone, as we've seen from him in college. So he was supposed to be a top 10 draft pick. He was possibly the best corner in the class, and people were so concerned that he fell all the way to 22, where the Titans took a chance on him after not having secondary. So I think that Titans, I have them as an elite team, but I have a star by them because I don't think they will be. Another team I have as an elite team that I have a star by them is the Broncos. If they trade for Aaron Rodgers if they trade for Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson, this team will be insane. Garrett Bowles proved to be one of the better tackles in football last year. The offensive line played really good. Courtland Sutton is coming back. He's young enough to where hopefully the ACL didn't take too much out of him, but we'll see. He's kind of a big guy. But say Courtland Sutton's not as good as he was. They still have Noah Fant, who's one of the most underrated players in football. They still have Jerry Jeudy, who's looking phenomenal in camp so far. They still have what's his name? Tim Patrick, I think. Tim Patrick. They still have Tim Patrick. They still have Noah Igbenogany, unknown player, but they still have Bradley Chubb. And the Broncos' secondary is probably one of, if not the best secondaries in the league. All right, we're talking about, you already have Bryce Callahan, who's probably the best slot corner in the league. You picked up Kyle Fuller after the Bears cut him. Add to that Patrick Surtain in the draft. Then you have Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, two of the better safeties in football. The Broncos have a scary secondary. Von Miller's coming back. We'll see how he plays. They still have... Is it Shelby Harris, I believe? Yeah, they still have Shelby Harris. They'll need to... Hopefully they draft... I don't know the Broncos draft class entirely well. So hopefully in the later rounds, they drafted some interior defensive linemen to kind of work in that 3-4. But... Or even if Drew Lock plays like he did his rookie year, or even if Drew Lock just improves. There was a couple games last year where he looked really good. So say Teddy Bridgewater returns to his form with the Saints. The Broncos are a team that no one is talking about, but should be considered a dangerous team, if not purely for their defensive ability. Colts. I think the Colts will be a really good team. I think I do have a star next to them as well. It depends on how Carson Wentz plays. I think Carson Wentz reuniting with his head coach will be good for him. I think Carson Wentz has looked really good in training camp. I think Carson Wentz had one horrifically bad year, and everyone just likes to pretend that he was always a bad quarterback. You look at his stats throughout his seasons, and he doesn't. Besides last year, none of them are really bad. They obviously have an incredibly good defense. They have DeForest Buckner, who's one of the best interior defensive linemen. They have the second best offensive line in football. They have okay wide receivers. We're talking about T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., Zach Pascal, and then they have Jack Doyle, I believe, is their tight end right now. They did sign, I believe it was Eric Fisher, so we'll see if he's able to come back from his Achilles by time for the season. I don't think he will be back to start, but I think at some point in the season he should be back. I think the Colts have potential to be really, really good. You brought back Xavier Rhodes. You have Kenny Moore. They have TJ Carey. Kwity Paye. They got Kwity Paye in the draft. He was one of the better edge rushers in the draft. Of course, they have the freak Darius Leonard, one of the most athletic, one of the better linebackers in the league. Bobby Okereke, who's kind of underrated as a linebacker. Do they still have Malik Hooker? I'm not even positive. I think that the Colts will be really good. Probably will win the division. We're taking it to the AFC North. Of course, I have the Browns in here. I'm probably biased as a Browns fan, but Browns probably have top 2 roster in football. You look at the names. You have Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb. You have Kareem Hunt, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, David Njoku. You have the best offensive line in football, comprised of Jedrick Wills, Joe Bitonio, J.C. Treader, Wyatt Teller, and then Jack Conklin. Then you go to the defense. You bring in John Johnson and Troy Hill and Jadeveon Clowney and Dak McKinley and Malik Jackson, and Andrew Billings is coming off the COVID reserve list. You have Denzel Ward. You bring in Greg Newsome and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. You bring Tommy Togiai in. Obviously, I don't know if I ever said it, but Myles Garrett, the best edge rusher in football. Grant Delpit is coming back from injury. Greedy Williams is coming back from injury. Browns have a stacked roster. We'll just see if the offensive and defensive installs go well. We'll see how it looks like week 1 against the Chiefs. But I think the Browns have, besides their lack of ability at defensive tackle, there isn't a weakness on the Browns roster. And even you go as far as depth, their offensive line, for example, there were maybe 5 games where everyone was healthy on their offensive line, 5, 6, or 7 maybe at most. Everyone else, you had Chris Hubbard, Kendall Lamb, Nick Harris, the center, had to play guard. You had Blake Hansen, Michael Dunn step in against Pittsburgh. I think that I think that the Browns should hopefully be good next year. Of course, there's always a possibility they're bad, but I think we're past that stage. We're past that era for Cleveland. Staying in the AFC North, we got the Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens will just be elite. That's just part of their thing. Lamar Jackson, one of the better athletes. I would say Lamar Jackson is one of the best football players in the league. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a top 10 quarterback. I put him on my top 10 purely because of his running ability and how that opens up the rest of the offense. But I don't think he's a top 10 passer of the football. The media is no longer allowed to film him throwing the football, because there was this one throw where he was absolutely getting massacred on for it. It was just an out route. And I know out routes are difficult to throw. I think he was throwing it to his right. Yeah, he was throwing it to his right. He's a right-handed passer. And it was a little wobbly. And I know they're difficult to throw. But when I tell you it was the most accurate wounded duck I have ever seen, it looked like it could have been a bad kick. It was going and going diagonal, and then we're going up and down and all over the place. It was one of the ugliest throws I have ever seen in my entire life. So they're not allowed to film him, to record him throwing anymore. But, the Ravens, I think their offensive line is being worked on right now. I don't think it's good by any means. They signed Alejandro Villanueva, who was definitely not a good signing. He's regressing clearly. He wasn't that good last year in Pittsburgh. He had an okay PFF grade, but Ben was getting rid of the ball in like a second. So it's impossible to have a bad PFF grade when it's impossible for anyone to get pressure because Ben's already got rid of the ball. They brought in Kevin Zeitler, who's also regressing, not like he was in Cincinnati or Cleveland. But they improved the wide receiver core. They brought in Sammy Watkins. They brought in Rashad Bateman. Mark Andrews is obviously a top 5 tight end in the league. J.K. Dobbins. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm yawning so much. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, 2 really good. I shouldn't say really good. One of the better running back duos in the league. I think they're both incredibly underrated. I think J.K. Dobbins will have a big year. You probably won't see either of them really get over 1,000 yards because that's really not what that offense is built to do. Like Lamar isn't built to have a crazy amount of passing yards, or the offense isn't. The offense is built for Lamar's running ability to make the defense play zone, and then he's a smart enough quarterback to dice apart his own defense. Excuse me. That's just what it is. Their defense, obviously, pretty good defense. Now, the one thing that concerns me is they lost both their starting edge rushers in Yannick Ngakoue and Matt Judon, but at the same time, I'm not really, as far as a football fan who's objectively looking at the Ravens, I'm not concerned about it because, who was Matt Judon before he was on the Ravens? Like, could you honestly have told me coming out of college, like, oh, Matt Judon, he's going to be a serviceable edge rusher? Like, the Ravens, they just have a good defense. That's just how they are. They have Patrick Queen, who's coming off a pretty good freshman year going into his sophomore year. Their corners are obviously really good. You have Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, 2 of the better corners in the league. I'm not exactly positive what they have at safety. Let me check real quick. Ravens depth chart. And even their third corner, I'm not exactly positive about. Let's see. Their offensive line should be decent. Oh, yeah, Ronnie Stanley, of course, coming back. But, excuse me. So, what do they got? So, it's Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott. Not exactly great for them. Okay, so I did think Jimmy Smith was their third corner, but I wasn't positive, but I was right about that. Their safeties aren't great, but, they're not bad either. That's the thing. They're not like tier 1 or tier 2 safeties, but they're serviceable starters in the league and especially on the Ravens defense where the defense is just built to play well. I'm not really worried. It's Jason Owe, Odafe Owe, however you want to say it. He was drafted. He should be good and okay. He's really athletic, but he's not exactly the most technical person ever. Like, honestly, I've heard it said, and I do agree with it, you could play him at tight end, and it would be about the same level of knowledge of how to play the position instead of edge, which I thought was funny because it is really true. But, I just saw this. They did bring in Jawan James from the Broncos, so he's not going to play this year. But that's just an interesting signing. Maybe Jawan James could stop being injury prone and play okay for him in the future. But yeah, so this year I think with the likes of Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams, and they re-signed their 3 interiors. Yeah, I think this team should be really good. I hope they're not too good, of course, as a Browns fan. But it is what it is. They'll probably be pretty good. I'm thinking 11 to 13 wins for this team is reasonable. We go to, in my opinion, the top 2 teams in the AFC. Start with Number 2, we got the Buffalo Bills. I think the Buffalo Bills did a really good job of not just retaining their talent this offseason, but improving on it. Josh Allen obviously has improved each year he's been in the league to the point where he was an MVP candidate this past year. David Singletary is their running back. Zach Moss should hopefully be coming back. An okay running back group, but let's be honest, their running backs are not the reason why they're good. Look at their wide receiver core. We're looking at Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, and Cole Beasley. First of all, huge props, round of applause for Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley grew a pair, put his foot in the ground, and said, "No, I'm not getting vaccinated. If you got a problem with that, I don't care." I have massive amounts of respect for this guy. People in the league are getting penalized, and I don't know if it's fines or whatever, but I really respect him coming out. Especially, he said something like, "This game is not about money for me anymore. I'm trying to win a Super Bowl ring, so you can find me if you want." Massive respect for Cole Beasley standing up for what you believe in. But yeah, that's just me. Behind them, they do have Gabriel Davis and Isaiah McKenzie. Their tight end group, now Dawson Knox, Jacob Hollister is a good duo. They could possibly trade for Zach Ertz, which I think would be a good move for him. Zach Ertz going ring hunting. Oh, why am I even talking about Josh Allen? How stupid of me. Josh Allen is not starting on this team. They're starting the one, the only MVP, Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky is the only quarterback, I think, in NFL history to start in 50 games and not throw a pick six. Good job, Mitch. Good job, Mitch. I don't know why they benched Mitchell Trubisky this past year. He played really well to start the year, and then they started losing games, and they ended up putting him back in towards the end of the season. I think he played okay this year. Obviously, they had to replace him because of how bad he had been the past year or two. But, it was a good signing for Buffalo. Kind of fits what they need, like a mobile quarterback, but he's not blazing speeds. Deion Dawkins, John Feliciano, Mitch Morse, Cody Ford, Darrell Williams. Good offensive line. Now, the one place they needed to work on was their defense, which is weird. You would not have thought that's what they needed coming into the season. And they did it. They did a really good job. Brought in Carlos Basham. They drafted Gregory Rousseau in the first round, trying to get that edge. They have Vernon Butler and Ed Oliver up the middle. Star Latulier is also on the team. Harrison Phillips behind him. Mario Addison also coming off the edge. Their linebackers, you have Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds, and AJ Klein, who are serviceable. I really like their corners. Tre'Davious White, Levi Wallace, and Taron Johnson. Taron Johnson, I believe, is the guy who picked 6 Lamar in the playoffs. So I have a special place in my heart for him. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, probably one of the top 3 safety duos in the league. But yeah, I love the Bills. Their big thing last year was that they could win in a shootout if their defense was able to hold. And so I think now they built their defense to hold. Oh, they have Brian Cox on there? Nice. Brian Cox used to play for the Browns. Yeah, I think the Bills' defense is heavily improved after last year. Their big weakness was edge rusher, and so they brought in Carlos Basham Jr. and Gregory Rousseau. Gregory Rousseau is honestly someone who does have inside versatility. That's where he built up most of his sacks at the U of M. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, obviously, I already talked about them. They don't really have much depth at linebacker, but they have 3 serviceable people. Well, Matt Milano, in my opinion, is kind of underrated. I wanted him on the Browns. Tremaine Edmonds has played okay in the league. But I really like this team. I think they'll be better than they were last year, which is great for them because they were really good last year. They're probably looking at the 2 seed, if not the 1 seed. I think the Bills are, it could be, depending on how Cleveland or Baltimore shows up, it could be the 3rd seed, but I really think the Bills, I would not be surprised to see the Bills in the AFC Championship again this year. And then obviously, we're going to go to the best team in the league, and I had a hard time putting them at the best team in the league personally. The only reason I put them in the first place is because if I didn't, everyone would be mad at me. But I'm saying the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm torn. I don't know if it's bias that gives me a hard time or genuine concern. But here's my problem. Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in the league. Most talented quarterback in the league. It's just non-debatable. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who he's okay, played pretty well, really fits what the Chiefs need, kind of a receiving back. Tyreek Hill, fastest man in the league. Mecole Hardman, really fast. Demarcus Robinson, typical third wide receiver. Brian Pringle behind him. Their offensive line is heavily improved. You're looking at Orlando Brown Jr., Joe Tooney, Austin Blythe, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, and it looks like they're going to be starting Mike Remmers at right tackle, which is, good for them. They did draft Creed Humphreys for whenever Austin Blythe's contract is, or Creed Humphrey, whenever Austin Blythe's contract is up. Now, my problem with them is what we're looking at on the defense. This defense is not good at all. It's not good. You have Tim Ward. Yeah, I don't know who it is either. Tim Ward is your starting left end. Chris Jones, one of the best defensive tackles. Jarran Reed. I mean, I know about him. He's not that good. Frank Clark, who's just regressing. Nick Bolton, who they took in the draft. They have Anthony Hitchens, Willie Gay. Obviously, linebackers aren't great, but that's just not the Chiefs' thing. Chiefs are buying into the modern NFL. Goodness gracious, the modern NFL thing where linebackers are just an expendable position. L'Jarius Sneed, who ended up being a steal in last year's draft. Charvarius Ward. Behind them, they have Mike Hughes and Rashad Fenton. Tyrann Mathieu, Quan Thornhill. It's the same. Well, that was kind of weird. It's the same team pretty much as last year. Obviously, they lost Sammy Watkins. Their offensive line has improved. I didn't mention him, but Travis Kelce, pretty good at his job. Oh, hold up. They don't have Anthony Sherman anymore? That's crazy. I didn't know about that. That sucks. But yeah, I mean, I don't like the roster right now. It's not the star-studded, and it still has a crazy amount of star power on it, but I just don't think it's as good as it was. Like, the defense is it's not like they're serviceable players. There's just glaring holes at linebacker and edge opposite, and even Frank Clark is kind of becoming to a point where, is he a serviceable starter? There's a glaring hole at corner. I mean, the defense is just going to be a problem. And I think the offense can last in a shootout, but, you put them against a team like Baltimore or a team like Buffalo or a team like Cleveland or even Indy with such good defenses, or you put them back up against the Bucks or the Rams, who have a really good defense, or the Niners. Actually, no, I don't think the Niners will have that good of a defense, but you get what I'm saying. It's just going to be difficult for them to be able to hold against these teams with really good offenses as well as a really strong defense. And so I just think the Chiefs will struggle a bit this year. I brought it up, but I never talked about it. Titans schedule. So they play the Cardinals. I think Cardinals win that game. They play the Seahawks. I'll give that to the Titans. They play the Colts. Give it to the Colts. Jets, obviously Titans. Jags, obviously Titans. Bills, go to the Bills. Chiefs, go to the Chiefs. Titans versus Colts, I'll have them split. Goes to Titans. Titans, Rams, give it to Rams. Titans, Saints. That's difficult. I'm going to give it to the Titans. Titans, Texans, give it to Titans. Titans, Patriots, give it to Titans. Titans, Jags. They have kind of an easy schedule. Titans, Steelers, give it to Titans. Titans, Niners, give it to Titans. They have an easy schedule. Maybe they will have a really good record, but I just don't see them as a really talented team. I think Julio. One thing that I'm interested about is will we see Julio from 2016? Or will we see the 32-year-old or 31-year-old player that we know now, where he just kind of, he's not the same, because so much of Julio's game was built off athleticism, and when you're getting older, you kind of lose that athleticism. I don't know. It's interesting to see. I'm excited for this season. I'll be back tomorrow talking about the elite NFC teams. That video is going to be a lot shorter because the NFC is hot garbage. I mean, it's just not good. But thank you so much for listening. Just going through it one more time. We have Titans, Broncos with stars, so possibly elite. Then we have Colts, Browns, Ravens, Bills, Chiefs. And those aren't really in any order. Because if it were me, I would put Browns at the top just because I'm biased. But again, thank you guys so much for listening. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe. Did a little light tap for punching the bell. Again, I'll be back tomorrow with the NFC teams. How many more times will I say again? I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Peace out.